A chilling truth lurked behind the walls of a remote Russian women's prison, a truth too horrifying for the outside world to comprehend. To most, a prison is a place where criminals are punished, but for those locked within its steel bars, the reality was far darker, a network of exploitation and abuse, organized by the very people meant to maintain order. Inside this fortress of despair, an unspeakable crime took place each night. The warden, Sergei Rakitin, under the cover of darkness, called upon the women of the prison. One by one, they were summoned to his office, where they were subjected to physical and sexual abuse. No woman was exempt, and the scale of his cruelty was unfathomable. It wasn't just the physical pain they suffered, but the stripping away of their identities, their dignity, their very souls. It was then that Officer Maria Orlova discovered a file, a chilling report on the abuse happening behind the prison's walls. She was a dedicated officer, loyal to her duty, but when she uncovered the truth, the depths of the horror shocked her to her core. Sexual harassment, brutal beatings, psychological torment, these were not isolated incidents, but a systematic pattern of destruction. Among the documents was a typed transcript, anonymous but harrowing, of audio recordings made by the victims, their voices trembling with fear. For years, these women had been silenced, their cries ignored, their suffering minimized. But now Maria would not stand idly by. The truth had to come to light, no matter the cost. As she sat in the dim light of her office in Moscow, the weight of the decision pressed down on her shoulders. The inquiry would take months, but the women's pain could not wait. That very night, Maria made a choice that would forever alter her life. She would enter the prison not as a police officer, but as an inmate. She would become one of them to expose the truth from within. Her heart raced, but her resolve was unwavering. She became Galina, a 35-year-old widow falsely accused of her husband's murder. It was a fake case, a staged trial, forged medical reports. Everything was meticulously planned by Maria and her trusted officers. Only 4 people knew the truth. The rest had to remain unaware. This mission was too dangerous, too vital to fail. Days later, a police van carrying Galina rolled through the imposing gates of the women's prison. As the van stopped, Maria, now disguised as a frail, frightened woman, stepped out. Her heart pounded in her chest, and fear gripped her, but she knew she had no choice. She had to see this through. Inside, everything was as she had feared. The prison was overcrowded, the stench of rot thick in the air. The food was barely edible, stale bread, watery porridge. The guards shouted vulgar insults as they marched through the halls, but worse than the physical conditions were the sounds of despair that filled the air. The weeping, the sobs that echoed through the cold stone walls. Each cry seemed to carry the weight of years of suffering. Maria's first night in the prison was a nightmare. Every sound in the darkness seemed amplified, the echoes of misery haunting her. As she lay on the hard, uncomfortable bed in her cell, she thought of the women who had suffered here, their lives reduced to nothing more than survival. She couldn't let it continue. The next day, a fellow inmate named Rubina approached her cautiously. She was a woman hardened by the system, but there was a kindness in her eyes. Rubina leaned in and whispered, "You're new here. Don't talk too much. If the warden notices you, it's over." "Why?" Maria asked, playing her part. Rubina's eyes filled with tears as she explained. The warden came at night, summoned them to his office. Those who refused to comply were beaten, their food taken away, sometimes poisoned. Rubina's voice trembled as she spoke, and Maria could feel the rage building inside her. But she knew she had to remain calm. The battle ahead would not be won with anger alone. Maria hid a miniature camera inside her cell, tucked away in the crack of the wall. She needed evidence, proof that would expose the corruption and cruelty that had taken root in this prison. Outside, her loyal driver, Seaman, was waiting. He had the real Maria's uniform and phone, ready to be used at a moment's notice. But inside the prison, she was Galina, and her mission had just begun. On the third night, Warden Sergei Rakitin arrived. He was a towering figure, his presence commanding fear. He approached Maria's cell, a cruel smile twisting his face. "What's your name?" he asked in a low, menacing voice. "Galina," Maria replied, keeping her head down as she had been instructed. Rakitin lifted her chin, his eyes scanning her body. "It's nice when fresh air comes into the prison," he said, a sinister smile creeping across his face. Maria's body trembled in disgust, but her eyes were cold with determination. This man was a monster, and she was here to bring him down. That night, she pressed a small button tied to her waist. Outside, Seaman received the signal, and the operation began. The camera inside her cell recorded every moment, every piece of evidence that would later help bring this system of abuse to its knees. The days passed, and Maria continued her investigation. She spoke to the women, gathering their stories, their testimonies, and slowly, a more horrifying truth emerged. The prison wasn't just a place of abuse, it was part of a larger criminal network. The warden, Sergei Rakitin, was a mere puppet, controlled by a powerful regional politician named Rav Tryapitsin. Tryapitsin was the mastermind behind a human trafficking and drug smuggling ring, using the prison as a hub for his illicit activities. Maria realized the scale of the operation was far greater than she had imagined. The warden's abuses were just the tip of the iceberg, and with this knowledge came a terrifying realization. The true predator was still out there, free to continue his reign of terror. Maria knew she couldn't wait any longer. She had to act. The next day, in a secret meeting with the Women's Rights Commission, Maria exposed what she had learned about Tryapitsin. But the risk was enormous. Tryapitsin had powerful allies, and they wouldn't let Maria's revelations go unpunished. A warning came quickly. A parcel arrived at Maria's office, containing a burned dress and a threatening note, "Leave the case, or else." But Maria wasn't intimidated. She knew this was her moment. The following night, she initiated Operation Black Night. Her team moved into position as news came in that a private party was being held at a farmhouse. 5 girls, taken from the prison, were to be displayed for wealthy foreign guests. It was sickening, but Maria had to act. At 9:00 p.m., Maria and her team set out. But tragedy struck as they neared the outskirts of the city. A truck rammed into their vehicle, sending it spinning off the road. The crash was devastating. Seaman, the driver, was killed instantly. Maria, critically injured, was rushed to the hospital. Despite her injuries, Maria refused to give up. "Call my team," she ordered from her hospital bed. "The operation continues. If I must go on a stretcher, so be it." Her determination was unwavering. The next night, her team stormed the farmhouse. Gunfire erupted, chaos ensued, but in the end, they rescued the 5 girls. One of them was Rubina, who had been officially declared dead by the authorities. Rav Tryapitsin tried to escape, but he was captured. The special task force had dismantled the operation. The evidence was overwhelming. Tryapitsin was arrested, and the charges against him were extensive: rape, human trafficking, conspiracy to murder, and corruption. His empire had crumbled. At the trial, Maria stood before the judge and made a powerful statement. "We are the ones who create leaders like Rav Tryapitsin. We allow this system to exist, and that is our greatest mistake. These prisons are not places of rehabilitation. They are centers of exploitation. I ask you to judge him not just in the name of the law, but in the name of humanity." Tryapitsin was sentenced to life in prison. Despite being awarded the Order of Valor, Maria chose not to attend the ceremony. Instead, she went directly to the rehabilitation center where the rescued women were staying. When Rubina saw her, she ran into her arms. "Ma'am, you've taught us how to live again," Rubina whispered. Months later, Maria was offered the position of chairperson for the National Commission for Women's Safety. But she declined. "My place is where injustice still lives, and justice is still needed," she replied. When a journalist asked her if she had ever been afraid to take on such powerful enemies, Maria smiled and said, "When a woman can walk into a prison disguised as a widow, that same woman can bring down the entire system." With those words, Maria Orlova became a symbol of strength, courage, and justice, a beacon of hope for all those who had suffered in silence for far too long.